Hey guys, here we go with a game from the Play Like a Chess Master series. Let's start with 1c3, trying to reach a Caro-Kann in reverse. Okay, my opponent does not go for it. So they are playing the modern defense. And my goal here is just going to be to play solid. Probably e4, bishop c4, castle, moves like that. This is a 10-minute rapid arena on chess.com. Okay, e6. So I'm going to put the bishop on d3 instead of c4, because the pawn on e6 kind of blocks this diagonal, and my opponent could play d5, kicking the bishop. All right, let's castle. And next we need to get the light square bishop out. I like doing this against the modern, trying to encourage h6, because then I can back the bishop up and the h6 pawn could become a target. Interesting. f6. Okay, so now this king is a bit exposed. So let's back up to e3, still pointing at the h6 square. And then my plan is going to be probably knight d2, rook e1, and just keep developing. Even though my opponent's position looks a little bit funky with all these pawns up, it's actually pretty solid still at this point. Okay, now the bishop is eyeing b7, which does open the e6 pawn up for an attack. So I'm eyeing moves like pawn to d5, bishop to b5, but I don't think I'm quite ready for any sort of big break here. A good move might actually be c4. I know it's moving this pawn another time, but I really want this knight on c3, so let's do that with knight c3 next. And I think I have the time to do this because my opponent is playing a little bit slowly with all these pawn moves. So they've made 5 pawn moves. We've made 4. Knight c3 next. And then we'll look for a pawn break in the center. Maybe d5. Okay, my opponent's playing d5 themselves. So they have to be a little bit careful. This king is still in the middle. Oftentimes there's some tactics when this happens because you can trade a couple times, throw a rook on e1, create some problems for the king, or maybe we could do something on these light diagonals. So I'm calculating c takes d, e takes d, e5, I think black has it defended enough times. C takes, e takes, e takes, knight takes. I might be a move too slow to really get any play there. One move that I really like here though is knight c3, because I think either capture I'm happy with. And this puts another attacker on the d-pawn. It's just a solid developing move. So oftentimes when my opponent plays slowly out of the opening, I'll look for ways to punish their slowness, I guess you could say, but at the same time, if there's nothing there, you don't want to waste all of your time on that move. So there I took 47 seconds. You can see over here on the right. Didn't see any immediate attacks on the black king, so I'm just developing another piece. And I'm okay with black capturing either of my pawns. Okay, so I could take with bishop, pinning the knight. Or I could take with knight, which looks more attractive because the knight kind of targets all of these advanced squares. But both options seem pretty good. If bishop takes, I am threatening to push this pawn up right away. I do like that, because I feel like the light squares, these in particular, is really the way that I'm going to attack my opponent. So bishop takes e4, threatening an immediate d5, looks pretty good. I think that's probably more precise than taking with the knight on e4. So let's see if my opponent castles here, because I think castling in d5, it's already looking pretty good. Okay, this pawn is now unprotected. The opponent's still leaving the king on e8. d5, pawn takes, Pawn takes. This knight has to move maybe to e5. Or do I play d5 pawn takes, knight takes? That might be better. Okay, and what if they... Sorry, d5. What if they bring the knight to e5? I could probably take e6. Or maybe throw in the queen check first. Yeah, throw in the queen check looks pretty strong. Okay, so d5, knight here, queen check. d5 pawn takes. Knight takes. Let's try that. I think this is the critical moment to play d5. Because if my opponent gets castled, their king gets quite a bit safer. So I don't want to be too slow, but I do think it is reasonable there to play a move like queen a4, queen e2, putting a rook on d1. Okay, so c takes, I'm just recalculating this, knight e5, knight takes knight. That doesn't look too bad. Let's see, c takes. I mean, knight e5 feels like the only reasonable move there. This is actually looking kind of good. Okay, so c takes, knight e5, knight takes, pawn takes, d6, targeting this bishop for free. And if bishop takes bishop, I can actually take the knight, hitting the queen. Okay, there's a lot of tactics here. Let's go with this, c takes d, because it's more forcing. If I take with the knight on d5, maybe the opponent can just castle. But after c takes d, knight e5, knight takes, pawn takes, d6 looks pretty good. Is there any reason not to take here? d6 first. There's always knight takes f3. I mean, this ruins the pawns for black a bit, separates them. I don't think that's bad unless I want the knight coming to e6. I did not consider that plan, but that does look pretty strong too. So knight e4, f5, knight e6. It's a huge fork. If castle, I could still go knight e6, forking the king and rook, or the rook and the queen. Oh, that actually looks pretty strong. Yeah, I'm changing my mind here. I think knight d4 looks really good. Trying to get the knight into e6. So one of the things that I like to talk about when I play these games is sort of playing from a position of strength. So put all the pieces on good squares first, get them as active as possible, and then start to look for these tactics. So you can see I'm changing my mind here a few different times. How do I want to play this position? But I think a lot of these lines are good for white, and the question is just how good are they? Trying to play as accurate as possible, because if the position is, let's say, 0.7 advantage for white according to the Stockfish, there's still a good chance at 0.7 that my opponent will come back. Whereas if I can create some scenario here where it's like a 3-pawn advantage and I still have 4.5 minutes on the clock, then I feel much more confident that I can finish the game. So I'm using a lot of time in this stretch. You can see every move I'm using more time than my opponent. But I feel this is a critical situation because I don't know how my opponent easily stops my threats here. I got moves like knight e6, pawn d6 is a threat. Both of those look really strong. I'm not sure what my opponent does to get out of this. So I feel justified spending, almost a minute every move in the last 4 moves to get to this position, because I think if I can secure a big advantage, then I won't need as much time in the conversion. Whereas my opponent, now he's starting to really think, but it might be too late, because if you look at this position, it's already looking pretty bad for black. He's probably looking at things like f5, trying to make a sort of a drastic move to save the position, but it's not going to be easy. Bishop c8, I play pawn d6, I think. because the bishop hits the rook in the corner. What else could my opponent try here? I keep looking at f5 for some reason, but knight e6 in every one of those lines seems pretty good. Alright, knight e6 now looks very good, but I also have this d6 idea. d6. If bishop takes bishop, I think I'm winning here because I take knight, hitting the queen, so that something has to take here, and then I can take the bishop back. So I'm getting 2 pieces for 1. d6, knight here could save the knight, though. But everything is opening up around the black king. That looks pretty good too. Or do I start with knight e6? Get this queen to move. Knight e6, queen d7. Knight takes f8. Pretty good. Yeah, I might even have d6 after that. Let's go for this. So the queen has to move. Probably queen d7. And now I want to take f8 and play d6. So kind of combining my two ideas here. If rook takes f8, which is kind of what I expect, d6. If bishop takes bishop, pawn takes knight, threatening the rook. So I kind of have that same tactic. And if the king ends up on f8, I think I go for that as well. So d6, knight c6. Oh, then maybe knight b5. Let's try it. Let's try it. Knight c6, knight b5, or knight c6. Pawn takes pawn, allows the queen trade. Okay, my opponent took this bishop. So I feel like pawn takes knight is good because for even material, I'm threatening the bishop and I'll be threatening the rook. I don't think I miscalculated this. Knight takes e4 does not look bad either, but this looks really good to me. I think this move should be winning. Let's see what my opponent does here. Queen takes queen, I can take back with rook. This bishop is still attacked. Yeah, there's no way to guard both of these pieces at the same time. And I don't think there's any attacks on my king. I wasn't really looking too closely for that, but you know, there could be some ideas over here, but my queen does guard g4. And e takes f8 is happening with check, which is important. So that simplifies a lot of the calculations because it's with check. I think my opponent might just have to take e7. I don't see anything better and play down a piece. They will have a pawn for it. But with that king in the center, queen and 2 rooks still on the board, 2 minor pieces for me. There's a lot of ways that I can attack the black king. I'm trying to think if there's anything creative that my opponent could play here. Not really seeing anything. Okay, that is creative. So I could trade queens first with check, or take here with check. Let's take here with check first. Bishop check, I don't think helps me. Queen takes queen, there's not going to be a mate over here, so I should be okay with this. Let's simplify. So now it's even better. I'm up rook and a bishop for 2 pawns. So we have a 6-point advantage. Trades will be good to help simplify. Centralizing the rooks will also be good. Let's do that first. I would love to get a rook in on the 7th rank. Let's see if we can get this knight out of the way. Also eyeing the pawn. Eyeing this, check. I expect knight c4. I might just kick him again, because that knight doesn't have a lot of squares from c4. Knight c6, I'm going to go with the rook check. Knight out here, I think I kick again, trying to trade him off. Coming down here gets trapped. This does not look great. This loses a pawn. Now the other rook is ready to come in. It's probably a good move. We'll take a moment to defend. And let's get the other rook in. Okay, this king is almost in a mating net. Let's try it. I think I have an idea here. Pawn check. If he takes, I have a rook coming to h1 and the other rook coming to g3, which should be a checkmate, because my knight guards these 2 squares. Yeah, rook g3 will be a mate. All right, they resign. Let's check the analysis on this one. So c3, not the strongest move. This was in another video I did. Can Caro-Kann players play c3? Oh wow, there was a big mistake here. It was knight takes f8. All right, let's think about this position. So my advantage at this point was 6.4. Knight takes f8 was a mistake. I'm looking at knight takes c7 check, queen takes, and then pawn fork, queen back, pawn takes knight, queen takes. I mean, that is opening up the black king quite a bit. Knight check, queen takes, knight b5 also looks pretty strong. What else could it be? d6 right away doesn't seem that strong. Oh, but maybe. It causes problems. Take here. Knight takes c7, check, and then take back. Oh, I bet it is d6. Mistake, but stronger than what I did in the game. f4 was the top move. Kicking this knight. Okay. What if it comes back to f7? f5. Alright. So f4 is not that exciting of a move. I kind of like d6 here. So it's not a 7.3 advantage, but it's showing 5.5 pawns. Because every move that I see for black, it looks like I'm immediately winning some material. That's what I like about this line. Whereas knight takes f8, rook takes f8, d6, it's still good. But if my opponent plays c takes d, it's not that impressive. Like here we're seeing only a 1-point advantage. Queen takes d6 isn't even being recommended after king f7. Material's equal and that king is getting to safety. Yeah, so knight takes f8, blunder. I think d6 would have been better. So I think that's probably the main takeaway from this game. Maybe I spent a little bit too much time creating this advantage, because right here I was down to 3.5 minutes. starting to feel a little bit of time pressure. But I think the opening went really well. I was happy with how I kind of handled the slow structure that my opponent played. But yeah, 1c3. This experiment didn't go so well. It's not the best option against the modern defense that my opponent played here. Alright, thanks for watching this video. Please click the like button. Please subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next video.